The Reconstruction and Development Programme is a socio-economic policy framework implemented under Nelson Mandela's African National Congress government in 1994. It intended to mobilise the country's people and resources to tackle the post-apartheid extensive economic inefficiency and social inequality. The RDP was designed to cater to the needs of the oppressed majority. The RDP focused on the triple bottom line: economic, social and environmental sustainability. The core of the programme consisted in sustainable development which addresses the needs of South Africans without compromising the interests of future generations. Its first priority was to meet the basic needs of South Africa's people, including homes. This subsidy housing, colloquially known as RDP housing, is still seen today as a means to combat the country's poor housing conditions. During the 1960s and 70s, many non-whites were forcibly relocated to underdeveloped rural Bantustans. However, the following decade, many returned to cities in search of employment. Informal settlements rapidly proliferated in peri-urban locations. The RDP proposed a housing rollout strategy to address the unplanned urbanization. When the RDP was launched in 1994, there was a need for approximately 1.5 million houses. When looking at demand, since 1994, the housing backlog has increased exponentially. At least 12 million South Africans are still in need of adequate housing. The current problem is largely an urban one. Over a quarter of urban South Africans live in informal housing. These settlements, also referred to as shanty towns or townships, include shacks, sometimes built in backyards. Demand has been accelerating for several reasons. Poverty and high inequality have produced large zones where South Africans occupy inadequate shelters. High urban population growth and unemployment have accelerated subsidised housing demand. And finally, the lack of access to private finance, as well as the lack of access to adequate and suitable land, excludes the poor from owning property. On the supply side, just above 3 million RDP homes have been delivered to date. In 2015, across all 10 South African provinces, between 14 and 26% of households live in an RDP or state-subsidised house. Government and human settlements stakeholders have announced that they would deliver another 1.5 million housing opportunities by 2019. In this critical context, the government is currently working to deliver what it describes as sustainable human settlements and improved quality of household life. Unfortunately, many homes built under the programme do not meet the minimum RDP housing standards. Bad insulation, cracked walls and leaking roofs have become the norm. To apply for RDP houses, recipients must have a total household income of less than R3,500 per month. That's the equivalent to £180. With such revenues, they cannot afford to repair and maintain their homes. Out of the 3 million RDP houses that were constructed between 1994 and 2010, over 2.6 million are now considered to be at high risk. According to the National Home Builder Registration Council, 610,000 houses should be knocked down and rebuilt. Twice as many homes have workmanship-related issues. An estimated 58.7 billion rand, or $5.5 billion, is currently required to cover the entire cost of restoring and reconstructing these homes. The bad quality of delivered houses stems from a series of problems within the construction process. The main issue can be summarised as the government's overall lack of control over the value chain, which is often, but not always, related to corruption and fraud. Insufficient coordination jeopardises the quality of the end product. This mainly affects the procurement process and the operations due to the lack of contractors' expertise, planning inadequacies and poor site management. Poor support services, such as false billing and lack of quality assurance, also weaken the programme. Additionally, profit margins in RDP housing industry are low. This prompts developers to cut corners. Construction costs are reduced at the expense of the house's quality. Thirdly, quality needs to be understood from the customer's perspective. However, researchers suggest that there is a lack of common understanding of what constitutes housing demand. According to the Financial and Fiscal Commission, outputs should be tailored to the recipient's household size and life stage, the movement between rural and urban areas, and the movement between outlying areas and city centres. There is a general lack of amenities, including schools, libraries, clinics, and parks for children and families to gather. Unreliable, underdeveloped, and expensive transportation networks also have a drastic consequence on the quality of recipients' lives. Another commonly criticised discrepancy is the lack of title deeds offered to recipients, which would enable them to use their houses as an asset in order to reduce poverty and increase their mobility. Overall, gaps between the quality expectations and perception need to be managed, starting from the government all the way to the end customer, passing through all entities involved. Finally, with restricted resources and a well-informed electorate, the government tends to seek quick wins and avoid lengthy capital-intensive projects. In the short term, high delivery rates and sellable achievements benefit its reputation. This significantly threatens the quality of RDP houses. The construction of shoddy houses has long-term consequences on social and economic sustainability. From a social perspective, improved quality can have a powerful and direct impact on the population's satisfaction and consequently on the government's approval rates. However, poor quality and deteriorating homes have left communities feeling powerless, neighbourhoods have become unsafe, and transportation costs have soared. In fact, many beneficiaries have illegally sold their homes. This is a tremendous wake-up call. Post-apartheid housing protests were at first typically held by shack dwellers. However, cities in South Africa have experienced a substantial rise in protests undertaken by disappointed RDP recipients. As the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa points out, giving people poorly constructed houses made a mockery of government efforts. Housing delivery started as a strategy to cater for rapid urbanisation and strengthen the legitimacy of ruling political parties. However, the current delivery regime has resolved neither problem. Rather than the endpoint of the post-apartheid urban crisis, deficient delivery reproduces it anew, accentuating discontent in the process. Moving on to the economic sustainability, the government's tight budget constraints call for superior efficiencies, higher productivity, and particularly effective use of capital. As quality management theory suggests, all these can be reached through improved quality. Detecting and rectifying errors is costing the state millions of rand. The Democratic Alliance Party has argued that restoring homes can cost 3 times more than building one from scratch. An article published in March 2015 claims that in the Northern Cape, 6,929,000 rand was spent on the restoration of just 32 houses. This amounts to 216,000 rand per house. Several improvements need to be undertaken in order to increase the quality of homes delivered. To start, house recipients' needs should be clearly defined, understood, and taken into account. Secondly, contractors and suppliers should be carefully and impartially selected without undue political influence. They should also be given incentives to adhere to minimum quality standards. Additionally, appropriate regulations should be put in place through service level agreements and operational level agreements in order to define what needs to be delivered and how it should be delivered. Finally, the government needs to focus on honest external communications that market the actual quality of RDP houses.
This is not the only solution to get long-term upliftment of the people. What we believe government should do is put more money into job creation, more money into skills development. There's no point in building someone a house which he has no money to maintain. And 5 to 10 years down the line, because this house was built fast, because it was built cheap, and because it was built with a large profit margin, some of these houses start to collapse. They have structural damages. And the people living in them still don't have jobs. They still don't have the ability to fix these houses. So the main emphasis should be on job creation, skills development, and thirdly, we think the government should really put a lot of effort and money into entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship will lead to small amounts of income that will lead to more jobs, more job creation in the communities, and then it will eventually grow into more and more economic stimulus, which will allow these people to maintain and afford the houses they live in.
Many propositions have been put forward in order to solve the housing crisis. The predominant consensus is that an overall lack of coordination between entities and the objectives related to the construction of sustainable dwellings, such as long-term use of land, transportation planning, and housing planning, has led to missed opportunities. Regrettably, these include educational and employment opportunities for the South African population.